20 games. That's all it takes for the league to stop lying. Because in October, everyone's a contender. In November, everyone still has excuses. But by the time you hit that 20 game mark, the truth starts leaking through the cracks. Rotations settle, identities form, and the standings stop being theory and start becoming a reality. Welcome to the Quarter 1 review. And before we get rolling, a special welcome to everyone joining us on Apple Podcasts for the very first time. I know we're a week late getting here. Life got in the way, tech got in the way, and the universe did what it does. But we made it. And whether you're on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or even an Android like myself, you're part of this family now. So let's set the stage. We're calling this the 21 game mark, even though the league never moves in perfect unison. Some teams are a step behind, some are a step forward. But right here, right now, this is the clearest snapshot of who they've been through the first quarter of the season. This is Round Ball Rants. Let's begin. Let's start where every season's truth begins, the standings. Because once you hit the 21 game threshold, the noise fades, the patterns settle, and the league starts telling you who it really is. Let's open with the Eastern Conference. Here are the Eastern Conference standings. The Detroit Pistons are in first place at 19-5. The New York Knicks second, 16-7. Boston Celtics third, 15-9. In fourth are the Toronto Raptors at 15-10. In fifth are the Orlando Magic at 14-10. The Miami Heat are in sixth at 14-10. The Philadelphia 76ers are in seventh at 13-10. The Cleveland Cavaliers are in eighth at 14-11. The Atlanta Hawks clock in at ninth, 14-11. The Milwaukee Bucks sit in 10th at 10-15. In 11th are the Chicago Bulls, 9-14. In 12th are the Charlotte Hornets at 7-17. The Brooklyn Nets are in 13th at 6-17. You have the Indiana Pacers in 14th at 5-18, and the Washington Wizards round out the East at 3-19 in 15th place. And that's the East, top to bottom. A conference full of shakeups, questions, surprises, and storylines we couldn't have predicted in October. Some teams rose, some stalled, some fell hard. And the picture that's forming now is far more honest than the one we started with. Now that we've laid the map out 1 through 15, we can finally talk about what these standings really mean. Because records tell you where teams ended up, but they don't always tell you how they got there. Quarter 1 always leaves us with two kinds of stories: the teams who rose above expectations and the ones who fell well below them. Before we get into the individual performances that define the East, let's talk about the teams that reshaped the conference, for better and for worse. Quarter 1 always leaves us with two kinds of stories: the teams who rose above expectations and the ones who fell below them. Let's start with the surprises, counting down from 5 to 1. In the East, at number 5, the Orlando Magic. At 14-10, Orlando has outpaced every reasonable expectation. This wasn't supposed to be the year that they climbed this high in the standings. Not with so much youth, not with so much development still ahead. Their defensive cohesion, their size, and the consistency of their young core have all come together faster than anyone projected. The Franz Wagner injury adds a cloud, but the fact that they're even in this position is proof of how far they've come. At number 4, the Toronto Raptors. Toronto was expected to be in a transition year. New coach, new direction, new system. Instead, they're 15-10 and surprisingly stable. Not dominant, not flashy, but solid in a way that hints at a foundation forming beneath them. They've jumped ahead of schedule, and that alone earns them a place on this list. At number 3, the Boston Celtics. Normally, Boston wouldn't qualify as a surprise. They're always good. But the surprise is how they've stayed afloat at 15-9. Injuries, experimentation, and lineup tweaks could have easily led to slippage, but instead they've managed to remain firmly near the top of the East. Surviving turbulence is its own kind of success. At number 2, the Miami Heat. Miami isn't a surprise because they're winning. They're a surprise because they're winning despite everything swirling around them. Injuries, inconsistency, roster questions. None of it has cracked them. 14-10 feels like the most Heat record possible. Resilient, stubborn, and built on a culture that refuses to bend. And at number 1, to nobody's surprise, the Detroit Pistons. No team in the East, maybe in the league, has redefined itself more dramatically than Detroit. 19-5, top of the conference. This isn't a flash in the pan or a lucky stretch. Cade Cunningham looks like he's making the leap. The young core is rising together, and Detroit has become the most unexpected powerhouse in quarter 1. They are the biggest surprise of the East, and it isn't even close. On the other side of the coin, we have to talk about the East disappointments. At number 5, the Indiana Pacers. Indiana's story is complicated. At 5-18 and sitting 14th in the East, they are clearly a disappointment. But the Halliburton injury makes them a unique case. Before he went down, they were projected to be solidly in the playoff mix. Once they lost their engine, the bottom fell out. So while their record is undeniably rough, the context keeps them at number 5 instead of higher. At number 4, the Chicago Bulls. Chicago's 9-14 start feels like deja vu. Stuck in between. Not bad enough to rebuild, not good enough to compete. It's the same story, the same ceiling, the same questions. And quarter 1 only reinforces that they're treading water with no clear plan forward. At number 3, the Atlanta Hawks. At 14-11, Atlanta isn't sinking, but they're not rising either. With Trae Young, with their scoring firepower, and with the amount of continuity that they've had, expectations were higher than hovering around the middle of the East. The Hawks aren't failing, but they're not meeting the standard this roster was built to reach. At number 2, the Milwaukee Bucks. At 10-15 and 10th in the East, Milwaukee has had the hardest fall relative to expectation. A Giannis team should not be here. A franchise with championship DNA should not be here. But uncertainty has a way of hollowing out a season. A new system, shifting roster, pressure, and the looming questions about Giannis's long-term future. The Bucks haven't just slipped in standings. They've slipped out of their identity. And at number 1, the Cleveland Cavaliers. Cleveland sits at 14-11, right alongside the Atlanta Hawks in the standings. And that's exactly the problem. The Cavs weren't supposed to be in the middle. They were supposed to climb. This was the year the young core turned the corner, tightened up the weaknesses, and pushed into the top tier. Instead, they look stuck. Not collapsing, but they're not ascending either. So that's the East. The risers, the fallers, the surprises, the letdowns. And now that we've built the team picture, it's time to talk about the players who defined quarter 1 in the East. Because the standings tell us where teams ended up, but the individual performances tell us how they got there. In the East, we have the most surprising breakout, Scottie Barnes. Scottie Barnes has gone from intriguing talent to legitimate problem for opposing defenses. This wasn't just a step forward, this was a shift in gravity. Toronto's early success, their stability, their identity, it all runs through Scottie's evolution. The playmaking is sharper, the confidence is louder, the impact is undeniable. He is the engine of the quarter 1 resurgence and the clearest breakout in the East. Defensive standout, Jalen Duren. Detroit's rise has many contributors, but no one has changed their interior presence more than Jalen Duren. He anchors a defense that suddenly looks organized, disciplined, and punishing. The physicality was always there. The discipline and awareness have now caught up. Duren has become the kind of defensive constant that lets everyone else play freer, faster, and more confident. He's the defensive backbone of one of the best teams in the East. Not one of the best team in the East through quarter one. And the most improved, Paolo Banchero. Paolo hasn't just improved. He's matured into the kind of player who bends game plans. His efficiency, decision-making, and defensive commitment have all taken leaps. He's elevated himself and the Magic at the same time, and that's a marker of true improvement. Paolo's growth is one of the biggest reasons Orlando is ahead of schedule in the East. The rookie of quarter one goes to Jacoby Walter. In a class full of exciting young talent, Jacoby Walter has delivered the most consistent quarter one performances in the East. He's poised, he's productive, and he never looks overwhelmed. Philly needed stability after the turbulence of the last couple seasons, and Walter has given them exactly that. A rookie who contributes to winning in real minutes is rare, and that's why he earns this award. Quarter one didn't just introduce the East to a new rookie, it introduced them to a stabilizer. Con Knipple has stepped into one of the most uncertain stretches of Charlotte basketball in years and played like one guy who isn't overwhelmed by any of it. The shooting is already translating. The feel for the game, the patience, the playmaking touch, the ability to make the right read instead of a loud one, all of it has shown up from day one. He never looks sped up. He never looks rattled, and on a team searching for rhythm, Knipple has quietly become the connective tissue they didn't know that they were going to need. He's not forcing stardom, he's building a foundation, and in a conference where most rookies are still finding their footing, Con Knipple already knows exactly who he is. That's why he's the rookie of quarter one in the East. Rookie of quarter one, Con Knipple, Charlotte Hornets. And that leads us to our MVP of quarter one. In the East, Cade Cunningham. Cade Cunningham has become the face of the biggest surprise in basketball. Detroit is 19-5. Not because they caught lightning in a bottle, but because their franchise player has elevated himself to an entirely new level. This is leadership. This is control. This is stardom becoming something more than potential. Cade has dictated pace, dictated flow, dictated outcomes, and through quarter one, no player in the East has been more valuable to their team's success than Cade Cunningham. And that's the story of the East. The teams, the players, the leaps, the setbacks, the stars emerging and the stars stabilizing. But this season hasn't belonged to just the East. Not yet. Not when the most dominant force in basketball sits on the other side of the league. Because if quarter one showed us anything, it's that the West has become the center of gravity in the NBA. Let's shift over and take a look at the Western Conference standings. If the East gave us clarity, then the West gave us gravity. Because this is where the league's center of power sits right now. It's the most dominant team, the deepest tier of contenders, and its harshest collapses. In first place, the Oklahoma City Thunder at 23-1. In second, the Los Angeles Lakers at 17-6. In third, the Denver Nuggets at 17-6. In fourth, the Houston Rockets at 15-6. In fifth, the San Antonio Spurs at 15-7. In sixth, the Minnesota Timberwolves at 15-8. In seventh, the Phoenix Suns 13-10. In eighth, the Golden State Warriors 13-10. In ninth, the Memphis Grizzlies at 11-13. In 10th, the Portland Trail Blazers at 9-15. In 11th, the Dallas Mavericks at 9-16. In 12th, the Utah Jazz at 8-15. In 13th, the Sacramento Kings 6-17. In 14th, the Los Angeles Clippers at 6-18. And 15th, the New Orleans Pelicans at 3-21. That's the West, and it's wild. At the top, Oklahoma City isn't just winning, they're separating from the conference at a historic pace. The Lakers, out of nowhere, have pushed themselves into the number 2 spot. Denver looks steady. Houston and San Antonio aren't waiting for approval, they're already here. And below that line, it's turbulence, regression, it's teams falling out of windows they thought they were climbing through. The Warriors caught in the middle, Memphis unable to recover their footing, Dallas searching for a new identity, Sacramento is collapsing, and the Clippers are imploding. And lastly, New Orleans, looking like they've hit rock bottom. Quarter 1 in the West didn't just reveal surprises, it delivered full-blown shocks. Teams we counted out surged, teams we trusted stumbled, and the balance of power shifted in ways nobody could predict back in October. Let's count down the 5 biggest surprises in the Western Conference from 5 to 1. At number 5, the Minnesota Timberwolves. At 15-8, Minnesota isn't a shock, but the way that they've held steady deserves recognition, losing key defensive personnel, juggling rotations, and trying to recalibrate after a deep playoff run. Could have easily knocked them backward. Instead, they've remained anchored in the upper tier of the West, not dominant but stable, resilient, and in position for a second half push. A quiet surprise, but a real one. At number 4, the San Antonio Spurs. San Antonio at 15-7. This early. This is ahead of schedule basketball. The young core has sped up its timeline. The system has started to take root, and their defensive connectivity has jumped levels. Nobody expected the Spurs to sit in the top 5 of the conference a quarter into the season. This is real progress, and it's happening faster than anyone anticipated. At number 3, the Houston Rockets. Holding steady at 15-6, Houston is no longer a young and fun story. They're a real basketball team with real expectations. The growth is visible, the cohesion is real, the defense has a backbone, and their young talent isn't just developing, it's producing wins. Houston is no longer waiting for the future, they've stepped into it. At number 2, the Denver Nuggets. Denver at 17-6 doesn't sound like a surprise, until you remember what they lost. Depth, role players, continuity pieces, and yet the machine keeps running. They've absorbed departures, injuries, and rotation questions and still sit tied for the second best record in the West. Quarter 1 proved the Nuggets' floor is higher than most teams' ceilings. And at number 1, the Los Angeles Lakers. This is the shock of the Western Conference. The Lakers weren't supposed to be here. Not at 17-6. Not in second place, not looking this balanced, this disciplined, this alive. After years of inconsistency, injuries, and roster instability, this team has found oxygen again. They've rediscovered pace, energy, identity, and maybe hope. Nobody had the Lakers as the second best team in the West through quarter 1. They are the biggest surprise of the conference. Now, let's flip the script, because for every breakthrough in the West, there was a collapse waiting right behind it. At number 5, the Memphis Grizzlies. Memphis at 11-13 feels like a team stuck in the mud. With Ja back, with their core intact, with their defensive identity supposedly returning, they should have climbed faster than this. But they aren't a disaster. They're not who they're supposed to be. And in a conference this competitive, treading water becomes a disappointment. At number 4, the Golden State Warriors. Golden State sits just above 500 at 13-12, and that's the problem. This roster, this resume, this championship DNA, they shouldn't be mediocre. They shouldn't be 8th in the West. They shouldn't be living in the maybe tier. The Warriors haven't collapsed, but they haven't risen either. And for a dynasty, stagnation is its own kind of fault. At number 3, the Dallas Mavericks. Dallas at 9-16 is not a rebuilding record, it's a lost record. This team is stuck between timelines, ideas, and identities. Talent, yes. Star power, yes. Direction, not so much. The Luka era ended. The new era hasn't begun. And quarter one exposed just how unclear that path really is. The Mavericks are a disappointment because they don't know who they are yet. At number 2, the Sacramento Kings. Sacramento at 6-17 is one of the steepest regressions in the league. 2 seasons ago, they lit the beam. Now, they're struggling to light up anything. The offense has dipped, the defense hasn't improved, and the energy that once defined this group feels like it has evaporated. The Kings aren't just losing games, they've lost momentum, identity, and belief. And at number 1, the Los Angeles Clippers. No collapse in the West is louder than this one. 6-18, 14th in the conference. A team built on star power, experience, and expectations that hasn't just underperformed, it's unraveled. Nothing fits, nothing flows, and nothing about this team suggests any sort of upward movement. The Clippers went from contender hopes to bottom of the West reality in the span of 1 quarter. They are the biggest disappointment in the Western Conference. So that's the story of the West, the risers who reshaped the race and the fallers who changed its trajectory. But just like in the East, teams don't just define quarter ones by themselves. Players also have their say. Let's talk about the individual performances that shaped the Western Conference through the first quarter. And just like we did for the East, the standings only tell part of the story. Quarter one is shaped also by the players, the ones who leapt, the ones who anchored, and the ones who defined the league's new center of gravity. These are the Western Conference individual awards through the first quarter of the season, one winner for each category. The most surprising, Breakout, Shaedon Sharpe, Portland Trail Blazers. Portland may not be winning, but Shaedon Sharpe is. This is the year the Flashes became foundation, where athleticism met polish, where the confidence met control, and where a young scorer began to look like a future star. Sharpe is producing through chaos, carrying responsibility beyond his years, and proving he belongs at the center of Portland's rebuild. His leap isn't empty calories, it's real growth. And that's why he's the West's breakout of quarter one. And the defensive standout is Chet Holmgren of the Oklahoma City Thunder. Oklahoma City's 23-1 start doesn't happen without Chet Holmgren. He's the anchor of a defense that bends games, closes gaps, and erases mistakes before they become points. His timing, his footwork, his instincts, they've elevated the Thunder from young and talented to terrifying and complete. In quarter one, no player shaped the back line of a winning team more than Chet. He's the defensive standout of the West. Most improved, Alperen Şengün, Houston Rockets. Houston's rise isn't a fluke, it's a product of development. And no one embodies that more than Alperen Şengün. The scoring efficiency is up, the playmaking has sharpened, the decision-making has matured. He has become the offensive fulcrum of a team that suddenly looks built to matter. This leap isn't just statistical, it's structural. Şengün is the engine of Houston's identity and the most improved player of quarter one in the West. And the rookie of quarter one, Reed Sheppard of the Houston Rockets. In a class full of promise, Reed Sheppard has developed the most immediate impact of any rookie in the Western Conference. Houston trusts him, and that's not something coaches hand out lightly. His shooting, his composure, his defensive instincts, and his ability to blend into winning basketball has all translated from day one. He doesn't force the game. He doesn't chase moments. He plays the right way, every possession, and that's rare, especially for a rookie contributing to a top-tier team. Reed Sheppard is the West's rookie of the quarter. And that brings us to the MVP of quarter one, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander of the Oklahoma City Thunder. There's dominance, and then there's SGA. At 23-1, the Thunder aren't just winning, they're overwhelming teams. And it starts with the calmest superstar in the league. His scoring is effortless. His control of pace is unmatched. His leadership has elevated the Thunder into the best team in basketball through the first quarter of the season. SGA is the engine, the closer, the compass, and the MVP of the Western Conference through quarter one. So that's the West. It's breakout stars, its defensive anchors, its leap makers, its rookies, all on the rise, and its MVP leading the best team in the league. Quarter one gave us the truth of these teams and the truth of these players. But before we go, there's one more truth to talk about. And this one isn't about standings or stat sheets. It's about life and how we carry the weight of our own first quarter. Let's get into the bounce. Before we get out of here, I want to leave you with something that connects everything we talked about today. Because if quarter one teaches us anything, in basketball or in life, it's that nobody has to be the finished product right now. Every team we covered tonight is living proof. Some started hot, some stumbled, some surprised us, others disappointed us. Some found their rhythm early, and others are still searching for who they're going to be. But here's the truth. None of them have to have the whole season figured out in December. They just have to make the sense of the quarter that they're in. And maybe that's something we can take with us too. Because this time of year can make you feel like you're supposed to hold everything at once. Every responsibility, every expectation, every emotion, every moment. But just like these teams, you don't have to win the whole season today. You just have to take care of your quarter. When life feels heavy, break it down. Section it off. Handle what's right in front of you, the way a team handles the first 20 games. They don't play the whole season in November, and we don't have to carry our whole lives into December. Detroit doesn't become 19-5 by rushing the story. Oklahoma City doesn't start 23-1 by trying to be perfect all at once. They take it one piece at a time, and so can we. If December feels overwhelming, step back, breathe, and remember that this is just your quarter one. You still have time, you still have space, you still have chapters left to write. I'm Vincent Cooper. This was Round Ball Rants. Thank you for spending this quarter one review with me. And remember, it's not just basketball, it's therapy with a bounce.